Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are digging into a stack of sources that, well, at first glance, it looks like a pretty standard history lesson.
Right.
We've got the historical accounts of the kings, some ancient chronicles, and some really heavy legal texts from the foundational laws of the era.
The serious stuff.
Exactly. But the more I read through this material, the less it felt like history and the more it felt like, a high-stakes courtroom drama.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we are looking at King Hezekiah, specifically this massive Passover celebration he threw. And honestly, the guy goes completely rogue.
Yeah. Going rogue is a very polite way of putting it. We are looking at a moment where the king of Judah essentially takes the rule book, the divine rule book, mind you, and just starts improvising.
Which is wild, right? Because when I think of the ancient Near East and specifically these biblical laws, I definitely don't think of improvisation.
No, not at all.
I think of, strike you down with lightning if you touch the wrong box.
Yeah.
Rules are the rules.
That is the general vibe, yes. I mean, the original law wasn't just a list of suggestions. It was the Constitution, the Health Code, and the Criminal Code all wrapped into one.
Right.
And yet, in the sources we have today, Hezekiah breaks protocol not once, but 3 distinct times.
3 times. We've got a calendar conflict, a massive purity violation, and then they completely mess with the timeline of the festival itself.
They really do.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to figure out what was actually going on here. Was this negligence? Was he just a bad king who didn't know the rules? Or was he actually some kind of legal genius finding loopholes in the system?
It's the central tension of religious life, isn't it? When does the spirit of the law overrule the letter of the law? And is there a legal precedent for breaking the law to save it?
That is the big question. Okay, let's get into the evidence. Exhibit A, the calendar, the when of it all.
Let's do it.
Now, I'm looking at the original laws in the text, and it seems pretty airtight. Passover is strictly scheduled for the 14th day of the first month, period.
That's the statute. It is entirely non-negotiable. The religious calendar starts in the spring. You do Passover then because that's when the historical Exodus happened.
It's an anniversary.
Exactly. You don't celebrate the 4th of July in August.
Right. But then we flip over to the historical chronicles, and Hezekiah sends out the invites for, wait for it, the second month.
He's 30 days late.
30 days late. Now, initially I thought, okay, maybe he's just disorganized. Maybe the messengers were backed up or something. But you're saying there's actually a legal argument for this.
There is, but I mean, it's a stretch, a massive stretch. Hezekiah is relying on a precedent found earlier in the texts. It's often referred to as the second Passover.
Okay, I looked at that specific rule. It says, if you're ceremonially unclean because of a dead body, or if you're on a really long journey, you can do Passover a month later.
Right.
So, case closed, right? You just use the loophole.
Not so fast. Think about the context of that original rule. That law was written for individuals. Yeah, it was for the guy who had to bury his dad and miss the festival, or the merchant who was stuck in camel traffic 3 towns over.
Right.
It was a personal exemption for very specific, extenuating circumstances.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
Hezekiah isn't
applying this to a guy named Bob. He's applying it to the entire nation of Judah.
Yeah, that's bold. That's like saying, hey, because 3 guys were sick on tax day, the entire country doesn't have to file until May.
Precisely. It's a massive legal leap. He's taking a micro exception and turning it into macro policy.
But why? Why was he so desperate to delay it? Why not just wait until next year?
Because of the political and spiritual state of the nation. The sources tell us the temple had been completely shut down by his predecessor.
It was basically abandoned.
Worse than abandoned. It was filled with junk. The priests weren't sanctified. They literally could not get the building ready in time for the first month.
So it was a logistical nightmare.
It was a disaster zone. And there's another layer here, too. The guests. Hezekiah sent letters up to the northern kingdom.
The north, wait, weren't they technically the enemy? Or at least politically separated from Judah?
They were separated, yes. And by this point in history, they were decimated. The Assyrian Empire had already crushed the north.
So these are refugees.
Survivors, really. Hezekiah wants to reunify the people. He desperately needs time for the message to travel up to them and for them to physically travel south to Jerusalem.
Oh, wow. So he looks at the law, he sees the second Passover clause for people on a long journey, and decides, well, we are all travelers right now. We are all unclean right now. We're doing it next month.
Exactly. He prioritized the event actually happening over the specific date it happened. He realized that if he waited a whole year to do it right, he might lose the momentum completely. the nation might just fall back into their old ways. It was a spiritual triage situation.
Okay, so I can see a judge maybe buying that argument.
Your Honor, it was a national emergency. I used the closest applicable statute.
It's legally shaky, but logical. Yeah, logical. But this next part, this is where I feel like he loses the case completely.
Ah, you mean the purity issue.
The purity problem, yes. Because this isn't just a scheduling conflict anymore. This is about who is actually allowed in the room. And from what I understand about these ancient texts, purity isn't just about washing your hands before dinner.
No, not at all. And we really need to clarify this for the modern ear because if you're listening today, the word unclean sounds like hygiene.
Like they needed a shower.
Right. But in the ancient Near East, ritual uncleanness is more like, think of it as spiritual radiation.
Radiation, that's intense.
It's the best analogy we have. The temple is where the divine presence dwells, and the divine is holy. Holiness is like a nuclear core.
Powerful.
Powerful, life-giving, absolutely, but highly dangerous if you approach it without the right shielding. The purity laws in the texts were essentially hazmat suits. They were the strict protocols to keep human beings safe in the presence of the divine.
So if you walk into the reactor core without your hazmat suit,
You die.
literally.
Literally. We see it elsewhere in the texts. People touch sacred objects improperly and drop dead. Priests offer unauthorized fire and are consumed. This wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't a game.
So the stakes are literally life and death. Now, let's look at the sources for Hezekiah's party. The Chronicles says a multitude of the people, mostly those refugees from the north we just talked about, had not cleansed themselves.
Right. They are walking into the reactor core without the suit.
They are ritually radioactive.
Exactly.
And the text says they ate the Passover otherwise than it was written. Which sounds to me like a very polite historical way of saying they broke the absolute cardinal rule of the entire ritual.
They absolutely did. The very same legal text Hezekiah used for the date change explicitly says you cannot eat the Passover if you are unclean. It's the one hard condition. And these people just ate it anyway.
Here is my question, though. Did Hezekiah know?
What do you mean?
Was this just a security breach? Like,
No.
the ancient bouncers missed a few guys at the temple door? Or did he knowingly allow this?
Oh, the text implies he knew perfectly well. The historical account describes Hezekiah actively praying for them. You don't pray for a pardon if you don't think a crime is actively being committed.
Wow. So picture the scene.
Hmm.
You've got thousands of refugees from the north. They've lost their homes. Their own religious system was destroyed years ago. They barely know the rules anymore.
Right.
They show up at Jerusalem, dirty, tired, and ritually illegal.
Hmm.
And Hezekiah has to make a call. Do I kick them out because they're dangerous, or do I let them eat?
And he chooses to let them eat. He chooses to risk the radiation, if we keep that analogy, because he wants them to connect with the divine more than he wants to protect the protocol.
And then he prays this prayer. I actually want to read this because this feels like the ultimate legal defense he's offering.
Go for it.
He says, "The good Lord pardon everyone who sets his heart to seek God, even though not according to the purification of the sanctuary."
That phrase right there, not according to the purification of the sanctuary. That is Hezekiah pleading guilty.
He's admitting it.
Yes. He's admitting, we broke the rules. We aren't wearing the hazmat suits.
But then he offers this totally new standard. Everyone who sets his heart.
This is a theological revolution in a single sentence.
A revolution.
Absolutely. He is arguing that internal posture setting the heart can override external procedure. He's betting his life and the lives of all these refugees that the divine cares more about seeking than about scrubbing.
That is a massive gamble. And does the reactor blow up?
It does not. The text says the Lord listened to Hezekiah and healed the people.
Healed. That's a really interesting word choice, actually. It implies they were sick, or maybe about to be sick.
Or that the radiation was a real threat, and the immunity was provided entirely because of the prayer. The verdict came back from the highest court. Pardoned.
That is huge. It basically establishes a precedent that if the intent is right, the technicalities can be waived. And I have to ask, isn't that a slippery slope?
Oh, definitely.
Because if you could just say, I set my heart, why have the rules at all? Why have a legal code?
That's the inherent danger. But I don't think Hezekiah was saying the rules don't matter. He was saying that in a crisis, when you are forced to choose between the rule and the relationship, you choose the relationship.
Right.
Think about those people from the north. If he had turned them away at the door, they never would have come back. They would have been completely lost to history.
So he broke the law to save the people.
Exactly. He understood the actual purpose behind the law.
Which perfectly leads us to the third thing they did. And this one, honestly, reading the sources, this one just feels like they were having too much fun to stop.
The extension of the festival?
The how long part of the case.
Yeah.
So, basic historical math here. The feast is legally mandated to be 7 days long.
Correct. The original text says 7 days.
7 days. You eat the specific foods, you do the rituals, you pack up, you go home.
7 days represents completion in their culture. It's a perfect cycle.
But the historical account says they celebrated for 7 days with great gladness. And then the whole assembly decided they literally took a vote to keep the party going for another 7 days.
A double portion. 14 days of nonstop feasting.
Now look, the first two deviations, the date and the purity, those were born out of absolute necessity.
Right. They were solving crises.
We can't do it on time, we aren't clean. But this third one, this wasn't a problem they were solving. This was just excess.
It was pure abundance. And you really have to look at the cost of this. You can't just extend a national festival for an extra week without a massive budget.
Seriously?
You have thousands of extra people in Jerusalem. Who's feeding them?
The text actually gives us the receipt for this. It says, Hezekiah gave the assembly 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep. Then the princes, clearly not wanting to be outdone by the king, they gave 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep.
That is a staggering amount of wealth. I mean, in an ancient agricultural economy, that's millions of dollars today. They are essentially liquidating the national treasury just to keep the barbecue going.
Why, though? Just because they were having a good time?
I think a good time vastly underplays what was happening. You have to remember the context. This nation had been deeply fractured. They had been steeped in idolatry. They had been miserable and oppressed for decades.
Right, the trauma.
Huge trauma. The text says there was great joy in Jerusalem, unlike anything since the golden age of Solomon. That is, hundreds of years of pent-up spiritual hunger finally being fed.
So when those first 7 days were up, nobody wanted to leave.
They couldn't bear to leave. And Hezekiah recognized that this joy, this deep, authentic unity, was the actual ultimate goal of the festival.
Yeah.
If he had stood up and said, sorry guys, the rule book says 7 days, everybody get out, he would have instantly killed the spirit of the entire movement.
It's kind of like the police showing up to a noise complaint, right?
How so?
They show up, but they see that the party is actually this beautiful neighborhood reconciliation meeting where bitter enemies are crying and hugging, and the cops just decide, you know what? We aren't shutting this down.
That is a perfect analogy. The strict timeline became entirely irrelevant because the purpose of the timeline was being fulfilled so overwhelmingly.
So if we look at the whole case, we have 3 massive strikes.
Yep.
Wrong month, wrong people, ritually speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and wrong duration. Any single one of these could have been grounds for a divine smiting based on the old laws.
Without a doubt.
But instead, the story ends with this profound blessing and healing. So for you listening, I have to ask the big question here. We have to synthesize this. What is the actual lesson from these sources? Is this ancient text secretly saying that religious rules are just optional?
I don't think it's saying they're optional at all. I think it's teaching us about hierarchy.
Hierarchy of what?
A hierarchy of values. We have this deep-seated tendency, especially in religion, but really you see it in any bureaucracy, to elevate the procedure way above the person. Oh, absolutely.
We love the checklist. Did you file the form in triplicate? Did you wash your hands the right way? Did you show up at the exact right time?
Because checklists are safe.
Yeah.
They're easy. You always know exactly where you stand.
Right. It removes the ambiguity. But Hezekiah's story suggests that the divine is not a bureaucrat.
Right.
He's portrayed more like a father.
Yeah.
And he's looking for something much more specific than compliance. His whole legal argument was that God wants the heart more than the hygiene.
But let's play devil's advocate for just a second, because I can easily hear a listener thinking, well, that's incredibly convenient. I'll just do whatever I want, and I'll just say my heart is in the right place.
And that is the exact risk. That's the utilitarian trap. Doing whatever works for you practically and just calling it holy.
Exactly.
But look at the text again. Hezekiah didn't do this because he was lazy.
No.
He didn't do it because he didn't care about the traditions. He did it because he was absolutely desperate to get broken people reconnected to God. So it wasn't about lowering the standard at all.
No. In fact, I would argue he drastically raised the standard.
Really? How so?
Think about it from a human behavior perspective, which is actually harder to just wash your hands and put on a clean ritual robe, or to truly set your whole heart to seek something.
Oh, the robe is definitely easier.
Right.
I can put on a robe while mentally planning out my grocery list. I
Yeah.
can check all the external boxes and be totally checked out internally.
Exactly. You can fake external compliance. Anyone can do that, but you cannot fake setting your heart. That is an internal, invisible work, and it is grueling.
Yeah.
So when Hezekiah shifted the main requirement from ritual purity to heart posture, he wasn't letting anyone off the hook. He was demanding something much more costly than a ceremonial bath.
Wow. That hits really hard for anyone dealing with perfectionism, honestly.
It really does.
I think a lot of us feel like if we can't do things exactly right, if we can't check every single box, or if we aren't quote unquote clean enough, then we shouldn't even bother showing up at all. We just disqualify ourselves.
We do that all the time. We think, I'm way too messy for this right now, or I haven't engaged with my faith in 10 years. I can't just walk back in now.
And Hezekiah is basically standing at the temple doors saying, I do not care if you're messy. I don't care if you're a month late. I don't care if you don't even know the songs. Just set your heart and get in here.
Yes. The ultimate message of the text is that connection is vastly more important than perfection. The rules exist solely to facilitate the relationship, not to block it.
Right.
And if the rule is actively blocking the relationship, the rule has to yield.
That is such a liberating thought.
Yeah.
But like you said earlier, it's also a deeply challenging one, because setting your heart isn't something you can just fake your way through.
It requires total, brutal honesty. And that's exactly what we see happening in this story. You have an entire nation getting honest, admitting they are unclean, admitting they are late to the party, and just throwing themselves entirely on the mercy of God.
And God catching them.
And God catching them.
Well, there you have it. The ancient case of Hezekiah versus the rule book. And the final verdict seems to be that while the rule book absolutely matters, the author of the book matters so much more.
Well said.
I really want to leave you with that provocative thought today as we wrap up. Where in your own life are you letting the perfect become the enemy of the good?
That's a great question.
Where are you waiting to be completely clean before you actually start seeking? Maybe, like Hezekiah, it's time to just throw open the doors, ignore the calendar, and start the party.
I couldn't agree more.
Thanks for diving in with us today. We'll see you next time.